I probably isn't extensive as yours, but I have a beautiful file on Ernie in Florida. Beautiful one.
Okay.
Well, that, if you're willing to give us access to that, you know.
Yeah, it's in Florida.
Yeah.
I'll drive over and get it.
And he's there. He's not far away.
Yeah. You could do that maybe. And just make copies.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
I got a lot of stuff in there.
That'd be wonderful.
Down already anytime you are.
Okay. All right. One of the great things about this is that we can edit out anything we say that we don't like. You know?
Well, that's nice.
If we repeat ourselves a lot,
Yeah.
you know? So that's a really
That's
good
good.
thing. Yes. Yeah. So are you rolling over?
Absolutely.
Okay. So Bill Wipfler, it's good to have you here to talk about Ernie Davis with us. And could you start out by telling us a little bit about the first time you saw him or met him?
Oh, sure. That's simple. It was when I was the basketball coach at EFA quite a number of years ago, and the boys from Beecher School came over to me one day and said, "Boy, have we got a talent for you coming up from the 8th grade." And I said, "Oh, yeah, I've heard this before, see." And I said, "Okay, what's his name?" He says, "His name is Ernie Davis." I said, "That's nice. He'll be over in the fall." So Ernie comes to EFA, and he goes out for football. In the very first play that he played as a JV in football, he fell down the end zone and broke his wrist. Well, basketball season opened up on October the 1st when you're allowed to try out, okay? So Ernie comes into the gym and with his arm in a cast from here right up to here. And he says, "I'd like to try out for the team, coach." And I said, "Not with that thing on, you're not gonna." I said, "You hurt somebody. And you could get hurt yourself." So he said, "You better get a note from your family physician or the school physician that this is okay, that you could play with this thing." Next day, Ernie's back. He got a note in his hand. The cast is coming off in 2 days, and it won't hurt him to practice a little bit. So in those days, I used to have scrimmages with my returning players, with all the newcomers coming in. So I put Ernie with the new guys and scrimmaged against my varsity team. What I saw was something. He sweeps both boards. He's got his arm in a cast now. He sweeps both boards. He scores half of the points from my team. And I'm saying, holy Moses, what a talent. That was my introduction to Ernie Davis. On top of it, he was such a lovely person as a person. So shy, impeccably dressed. Come to school with beautiful sweaters and lived right across the street from the school, by the way, with his mother. And his entire group of kids that he ran around with just thought he was the greatest because of a kid, not so much as athletic exploits, but as a person. Matter of fact, he ended up junior prom king, Ernie Davis, absolutely. So that's the kind of a kid he was.
Let's see. The basketball, then he played as a varsity player all 4 years of his high school career then? And did you coach him?
I coached him his first year.
Just the first year, okay.
When he took his arm, took the cast off his arm.
Okay.
And then they switched me from varsity basketball coach. I was baseball coach at this time as well. And they switched me to backfield coach with which Marty Harrigan was the head coach, and I was the backfield coach in football, and I dropped the basketball, and Jim Flynn picked up the basketball from me. And so he went on to be All-American basketball player in high school, and All-American football player in high school.
How was it? You talked about how amazing he was that first day playing with a cast.
Yeah.
How did you improve him? When he has such natural talent, tell me about coaching him.
Well, I didn't improve him at all because I coached only 1 year as a basketball player. But our first game, as I can recall this vividly, we were playing down in Union Endicott. Bob knows what it is. What do we call it? The dungeon or the hole? The gym was down and the thing. And so Ernie's a freshman. He has cast off now. And in the first quarter, I didn't start him in the ball game. At the end of the first quarter, I'm looking down the bench, and here's Ernie. He's soaking wet with perspiration, just looking. So I said, Ernie, do you like to go in here? When he got excited, he stuttered a little bit. What, coach? And I said, why don't you go for John Myers here? See what you can do. Well, again, swept both boards, scored 20 points. We won the basketball game. And the Union Endicott coach came to me after. He says, you mean to tell me that this kid's a freshman? He says, geez, I think I better quit. I'm going to see him for 3 more years. And I said, I think so. I think so. But the interesting thing with me was with football, because then I went to football. And I was in his freshman year, he didn't play, but his sophomore year, he was an end, good end, and he played all year as an end. And then in his junior year, one of our backs, Dave Green, fell down and broke his shoulder. And so Marty says, oh gee, there goes our best back. And I said, let's huddle here a minute, Marty. The two of us got together. And I said, you know who our back should be, don't you? He said, okay, you take Ernie and starting tomorrow and run a few plays for him. I don't complicate it very much. And we'll make a back out of him. So we took him in the locker room and said, Ernie, we're gonna switch you to backfield. Is that okay with you? He says, whatever you say, coach. Typical Ernie. And from then on, I can remember his first game as a back. We were playing Johnson City, and Moon Mullins was the coach. Used to be over at the south side. Went down to Johnson City. He comes up with his team. Of course, he never heard about Ernie Davis. We turned Ernie loose on him, and Ernie ran all over Johnson City. He says, where in the world did you get that guy? But he was something. Most coachable. And his eagerness to play was so extensive that I had my hands full with him as a back, because he wanted to get to the line before the blockers got there. And geez, I said, Ernie, look, start off, don't rush to the hole right away. I said, the pulling guards aren't even started yet. You're trying to go through there by yourself. Pick your spot. Run along with the guys, and as soon as you see daylight, head for it. Well, he had a knack, not coachable, it's just the way he was, where he could run at you, stop on a dime, and then a second later he's going full blast in another direction. So the backs try to tackle him. You better get him before he got to the line of scrimmage, because if he ever gets beyond it, he's gone. And he did that all through his high school career. Unbelievable talent as a back, just unbelievable. It's hard to imagine the things he did. So he was heavily recruited by some of the major colleges in the country, which included Navy, Notre Dame, among them. And of course, Jim Brown and Schwartzwalder were down in my office about, it seems like me, every other day. Or up to Tony DeFilippo, who was an alumnus of Syracuse. I got my master's there, so a lot of us were pushing, why don't you go up to Syracuse? Finally he says, yeah, okay. So he decides, tells Ben Schwartzer, I'll come up to Syracuse. Well, in those days, freshmen didn't play on the varsity in college. So he played with the freshman team up there. And some of the things he did, they tell stories about what he did as a freshman, say, to other teams. So he gets up there and he does his thing. He's All-American. But the story that I'd like to really relate to him, that maybe very few people don't know about Ernie, what happened to him. So he decides to go to Syracuse. And in his senior year in high school, after he decided that he would go to Syracuse, he came to me one day and he says, Coach, I can't run. What do you mean you can't run? I can't move my legs. You what? So Marty and I got to, hey Marty, Ernie says he can't run. And Marty says, come on, Ernie. What do you mean you can't run? I can't make my legs go. So we called Dr. Holbrook, who was a school physician, and said, hey, you better examine him. So he examined him. Ernie still says he couldn't run. And so they brought in all the experts around here, all the doctors, and examined Ernie, and they said, you know what? We can't find a thing wrong with Ernie. There's really nothing wrong with him. It must be psychological. There's nothing wrong with Ernie Davis. So, geez, we got a hold of Schwartzwalder up in Syracuse and said, hey, your boy here, he's complaining again, so we'll come down and get him. So they brought him up to Syracuse and had all the top physicians in the East look at Ernie. He couldn't find a thing wrong with him. He says, I can't make my legs go. Well, some of the doubters begin to say, well, he doesn't really want to play and all that sort of thing. We said, that's not true. That isn't his makeup at all. So finally, the doctors at home said, well, let's try a chiropractor. So we had a friend, Ralph Champion, chiropractor, registered chiropractor, licensed. He was a friend of ours. And he said, yeah, I'll take a look at him. So I get Ernie, drive my car up to his house and helping him. And he's like an old man. He's hard to get in the car. He's like this. Get him up to Dr. Champion's. I'm helping him out of the car, helping him into the office, helping him into the intercom there. So I'm sitting out in the waiting room, waiting for something to happen. All of a sudden I hear this banging up against the wall. You know, boom, boom. What the heck is this? Then I hear Ernie's contagious laughter. He had great laughter. Pretty soon, he walks out and he says, hey, Coach, I can walk. Look. So we had a football game that night, and boy, did he take that team apart.
What did the chiropractor do?
I don't know.
Slam him against
You know, this is what chiropractors do. There's probably a pinched nerve in here somewhere, you know, in his back, and he just adjusted it, and away he goes.
That's a story.
And that's no. Very few people know that story. Did you know that story, Bob? Yeah, Bob didn't know that
Wow,
story.
wow, that's amazing.
He was something.
Yeah, yeah, that was his senior year.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
Is that the biggest setback you ever saw him? Did he have other setbacks besides that one that you just described?
Not that I know of. He never got hurt playing the game.
Did he hurt? How was he about hurting others? Did he?
Well, his style, as I told you, was the give and go type of thing, stop and go, which was God given. But when he get cornered, he'd run right over you. As a matter of fact, what he would do, when we were working out in practice, you'd see him over there by himself doing push-ups. I said, he says, Coach, my upper body is not as strong as it should be. He was so thoughtful of his own body, you know. I've got to get bigger through the shoulders here. I'm not going to be a good college player if I don't have some bigger shoulder. I got to do He's doing push-ups all the time.
So he self-imposed a regimen.
Yeah.
Tell us about his work ethic, about that.
Oh, his work ethics were unbelievable. On his own. See, like I told you about the push-ups. He'd go out and he'd do those incessantly until he was just exhausted. He'd probably be the last guy off the practice field every night, would be Ernie. Run those wind sprints, geez, leave people behind. And of course, when they got him up to Syracuse, Ben Schwartzwalder had a certain play. They called it the scissors play. You remember that, Bobby? He had a scissors play. So, yeah, what's the scissors play? Well, the quarterback, Ernie's out here on the flank, and he's a running back. And what he does is the quarterback gets the ball and he starts down the line of scrimmage in back of the offensive lineman. And Ernie sort of takes a little jigger step to his right like he's going to follow this. All of a sudden, he cuts back this way, and the quarterback hands him the ball, and he comes back through here, and they named it the scissors play. And he just drove teams crazy trying to stop him with the scissors play, because they'd fake it. See, sometimes they wouldn't use the scissors play, then he'd go along the other way.
Could he do it in any direction?
Well, just this way and then this way. That's it. Or he'd go straight ahead, you know, and fake like he was going to go, and then he'd go this way. Oh, he did everything as a back. He was unbelievable. They took him down, in one of his first bowl, big bowl, I think it was the Cotton, or it wasn't the Cotton Bowl, wasn't it, down in Texas, and he's playing, and my God, what he did. He's a good pass receiver, too. And I think it was the first or second play in the Cotton Bowl against a big Texas team, these big, rugged guys. Ernie takes off, flip him a pass, and he catches that thing, and he went through those guys like nothing. And they said, who the devil is this guy? That's Ernie. He was quite a lad. And another thing about him was, he was so shy. You go in the locker room, Marty and I used to be allowed to go into the Syracuse locker room and listen to the coaches give instructions, and Ernie would listen attentively, but he was so shy. My gosh. No braggadocio of any kind. He's almost apologetic for running over people. He's that kind of a person.
How about with the baseball? Did you say you coached
Yes.
him in could you tell us a little bit about, because we don't know too much about him as a baseball.
Well, in baseball, Ernie came out to the team and he wanted to be an outfielder. So we put him in the outfield. And as a batter, if he connected with one, he hit him mild. He played the old Parker Field, hit him across the gridiron up there. But for some reason, he never really did manage hitting a curveball. Kids would throw him a curveball, and Ernie would swing and this, and he really was not a top batter. But he eventually ended up playing first base, and he was a beautiful fielder, big and strong and tall and good looking. Now, I'll tell you a story about Ernie that very few people know about in baseball. So we were down in the Triple Cities area one day playing baseball. And Ernie was on third base, and there was one out. And the batter hit a Baltimore chop. You know what that is? Well, where he slams, the batter hits the ball and hits the ground, and it pops high in the air, and nobody can feel it till it comes down, okay? So, at the crack of the bat, Ernie takes off from third base. And the third baseman catches the ball, throws it to the catcher, and Ernie is as nice as he can. Here's a poor catcher stand without a ball. He's standing like this, and Ernie just dives into home plate, you know. And the ball is high, and the kid brings it down. Umpire says, "You're out." Oh my God, you should have seen Ernie. With the white dust on that black face and those eyes. He jumped up and he looked at that umpire, and he was really going to go after him. I had to run in and grab him. And I said to the umpire, "What's the matter with you?" He says, "Oh, he slid over home plate. He really slid over it." I says, "He was out, but he was safe by 15 feet. The guy had to catch the ball up in the air. He's already here." And he says, "He's out." And Ernie still, I'm restraining Ernie all this time, and I'm moving back. And this umpire says, "I'll take this mask and break it over your black skull if you move one." Or I said to the umpire, "You know what? I have a tendency to let Ernie go." You know, Ernie was a 200-pound kid, 6'2", strong as a bull. He'd have taken that umpire and bashed him into. There was a pretty good crowd at this game, the hometown people, and they realized what a terrible call that was against Ernie. And so when we finally pulled him away, they cheered her, booed the umpire. This is out of town. That actually happened.
So there was prejudice. Ernie encountered prejudice.
Sort of, but that umpire, he wasn't gonna call him safe. Made up his mind apparently.
Was there any other time that this seemed to be was this a racial prejudice as far as you could tell on the part of the animal? Or hard to say?
Not really. For some reason, he had a way with people, whites, blacks, and anybody ever met him just liked him. Didn't make any difference.
Yeah.
And there seemed to be no prejudice of any kind. He didn't know black from white.
Mm-hmm.
You know? He was like the rest of us. And that's the way we treated him, and that's the way he treated everybody else.
Tell us a little bit about how Ernie interacted with the kids his own age, kids on the team.
Oh, he was their idol. Yeah. He was their idol.
He was shy.
Very shy.
So did you see him talking to
Oh, yeah. He interacted with his peer group just great. As you could see, they nominated him for everything. Because he was just an all-around. There isn't a nicer person in the world that I ever met. And courageous. You hear the stories about his sicknesses?
Well, let's hear it.
The story goes, this came out of the Cleveland Plain Dealer, that after Ernie had developed this leukemia thing, he'd go into remission, see. And he was walking down he came out of a movie or something down in Cleveland, and some passerby stopped and says, "Aren't you Ernie Davis?" And Ernie has shy, like I say, very shy. And he said, "Oh, no." And he said, "Well, it's a good thing, because Ernie Davis has got leukemia and he hasn't got long to live." And it's when the official physicians came up with what his demise was, you know what his answer was? "Oh, shucks." Knowing he didn't have long to live. And a couple of days when he was in remission, he's in Cleveland, and he goes up to Art Modell, who was the head man of the Cleveland Browns. That's who he was going to be playing with. And Ernie went up to his office one day and just dropped by and said, "I just dropped by to see how you guys were doing," knowing full well 2 days later he's in the hospital, he's dead.
So he just stopped by
To say,
goodbye without saying goodbye. Yeah, that's courage. Yeah.
yeah. Well, I know in my own case that I will never complain about the things that happened to me. And a lot of them have, and are still happening to me physically. That no matter what, when you think of the courage that Ernie Davis had, that emulate him if you could. No, that's okay.
That's another thing we've heard people say, is that he led by example.
Yeah.
People would.
It's exactly right.
Can you give us some other examples of his leadership by example? I mean, we have the way he dealt with his illness. Are there some other ways, either in the school or examples where other people kind of?
Well, probably Jim Flynn could explain this one better than I can, because basically in basketball, they won, something like 50 some odd games or something.
He's got tape.
Different people.
Yeah. So that's what we're talking, consistent, yeah.
And here I am, many years his senior, and yet he's the one that I would like to copy it.
Isn't that amazing? Yeah.
Yeah.
And rare.
We're ready to go anytime.
Yeah. You were going to talk about how he led by example, and
Oh,
you were
yeah,
trying to say
yeah.
something-
It was mainly in basketball. Jim Flynn will tell you about it. That when the score is 60-20 in favor of EFA, you couldn't find Ernie. He's passing to everybody. He doesn't make any bad, doesn't. He just sort of lasts. But if the score is 58-59, then Ernie, he more or less like takes over. and he'll get the ball for you, and he'll stick it in the basket, and he'll win the game for you. But only if you need it. But for him to make 35 or 40 points, that's not his style. Never.
Was he like that even in his first year?
Yeah, that's the way. Apparently, that's just his nature. That's the way he was. And his mother is such a lovely lady, Marie Fleming, and how she withstood the loss of her son, I'll never know. That inner strength she must have.
Yeah.
That he must have got it from her.
Do you think that's where
Yeah.
you attribute his qualities, his strength
Yes.
to Marie Fleming? Yeah, his mom. Yeah.
Yep.
Could you tell us a little bit about Ernie as a student?
Well, he placed his academics in very high, more so than his sports, really. You see his statue up there with a football in one hand and his books in the other. Books were quite important to him. He wanted to be a top student. He just didn't want to be an average student, but a top student. And he worked at it. He lived across the street from the school. And the assistant principal was a guy by the name of Cy Perry. You remember him, Bob, I'm sure. And Cy Perry would come and open up the school building in the morning, like 7 o'clock, something like that. Who would meet him at the door every morning? Ernie, from across the street, studying. 7 o'clock in the morning.
That's really amazing.
Mm-hmm. I'll take one of those.
Yeah.
Thank you. But he was really something, I'll tell you. A lot of kids, youngsters, hope that they hear people like myself speaking of a person like that. And there should be more idols, not just the fact that he was idol as a sports person, but as a human being.
How was he with the girls? You talk about how the boys idolized him, his teammates. How about the girls? Were they?
I guess you could imagine the answer to that one, can't you?
No, tell me about it.
Oh, the girls, they flock around him like... I guess he did have a girl when he was in college that he thought a lot of. But I never met her. But I had heard from him and from others that he did have a nice girl.
Yeah, I think I read it. The Sports Illustrated article talks about her.
Yeah.
I think Helen, I think was her name. She sounds like a really wonderful person. Too.
Yeah. I've never met her. But you can imagine, he was a handsome black person.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, really. Real handsome-looking person.
Yes, yes. And they talk about, you mentioned how impeccably he dressed.
Mm-hmm.
Was that rare? How did he?
Well, it seemed to be because he would come to school every morning. I don't know where he got all these beautiful sweaters, but he always had a beautiful-looking outfit on, Pants pressed just right.
Did he ever get in trouble?
Not that I know.
Never did anything? No? Nothing?
Not that I know. Do you know, Bob? See? As a matter of fact, people from Hollywood came to town. And they said, you know, we want to make an Ernie Davis picture. But, you know, the thing that bothers us the most is we can't find anything wrong with him. It's hard for us to really make a story when he's never done anything wrong. And I said, well, I can't help you out there. Amazing.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. Now, how about as far as religion goes? Did you know much about him as in that regard?
Religious?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm sure he was highly religious, but as I remember, someone mentioned that after he had this diagnosis of leukemia, he was riding in somebody's car or taxi cab or somewhere, and he had left, and when he left, and somebody found a little small prayer book or a little small Bible that he had forgotten and left it in the seat. Mm-hmm. So he probably carried that around with him.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So you can tell he was a highly religious person.
But it sounds like as his coach, if you weren't that aware of it, he kind of kept that quiet in some ways.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Was he talk about his confidence, because it sounds like he didn't want the limelight, and he was almost, you said, apologetic, almost about his prowess. But yet, was he confident?
Oh. He was confident in the most positive way, you know, not cocky, but confident. Always thought there wasn't anything that he couldn't do. And that included not only his schoolwork, but his sports and everything else about him. That I don't think he ever thought there wasn't anything that he could not do in his own mind, which is quite a characteristic.
Yeah. How about, can you think of, did he inspire confidence in others?
Oh, yes.
Did you see that?
That's very evident in his work with his peer group, especially his teammates in sports. Yeah. See, he made every effort to make his teammates look good. See what I mean? Mm-hmm. In basketball, and he's playing with some of his teammates that didn't get the notoriety he did, he'd make sure that he'd pass the ball off to them and let them make the basket rather than him make the basket.
How could he do that in football? How did he make his teammates look good in football?
Well, number one, as great a runner as he was a vicious blocker. You know, when it wasn't his turn to take the ball, but he was going to run interference for somebody else, look out. Because he'd level you to free up a teammate that could gain yards.
How about, can you tell us a little bit about his impact on younger people, younger kids that you
Well,
noticed?
In those days, he was so much idolized that young kids just flocked around him, and he loved kids. You know, he'd do anything for kids. As a matter of fact, I remember one time, my wife and I and our children lived up on Scott Avenue in West Elmira, and so I asked her, how'd you like to come over to the house for lunch? lunch someday. He said, yeah, Coach, I'd like to do that. So the word got around, and the kids in the neighborhood, that Ernie Davis is going to be at Mr. Wipfler's house. Matter of fact, some people still remark that to me today. They're doctors here in town. There were kids then on the street. And they said, geez, we went over to your house and met Ernie Davis. I'll never forget it. Here he is, a doctor here in town now. What an impression he made.
Yeah, yeah. Well, speaking of long-lasting impressions, could you tell us a little bit about the newspaper down in Florida recently, the article that...
Well, that happened quite a few years ago. And I got to meet this Tim Leone. He doesn't work for the newspaper anymore. I think he works up in Tampa somewhere now. He got a lot of good reaction from my letter that he printed. Because he called me and he said, boy, a lot of inquiries as to...
Could you tell us about the article he wrote about Ernie? And then...
Well, it's just there. That's the only one he wrote.
Yeah, yeah.
In the article. He was talking about, in his article, about people that nobody ever forgets. And he says Ernie would have been 20 years old or whatever his birthday was today in his article. And everybody still remembers him. He's not somebody you forget.
And how has been, since you wrote the letter you wrote a letter to him,
Mm-hmm.
and then he published your letter,
Mm-hmm.
and you met him, and then you said people in Sarasota spoke to you. What did folks?
Well, well, people that I knew mainly
Okay.
in the area said, "Boy, that's some article that we read about in the Sarasota paper. Really quite revealing."
Is there anything more you need to tell us about him?
No, I think I really covered the waterfront.
You really did. We learned a lot of things we didn't know before. Yeah. I guess what are some things, I guess just to finish up, that Ernie had that you would like to see in today's athletes or today's kids that he had more of and you'd like to see more of?
Well, I would say the one word that best expresses that answer to that is integrity. And if you look it up in the dictionary, you'll understand what I mean. He was reliable, honest, as the day is long. You always knew where you stood with him. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much. Yeah. It's just a thrill to hear you talk about it.
Yeah.
It really